How are you?
I'm all right, not bad, thanks. Right, we're going to go through some of these questions. Hopefully, you'll learn a little bit more about your book today as well, and a little bit more about you as well, and the genres that you write in. And at the end of it, we'll probably have a little bit of fun stuff and see where it goes from there.
Okay, great.
Right, you ready for question one?
Sure, go ahead.
You write quite varied. You've got quite a varied writing. How would you describe it? There's lots of genres out there. There's paranormal, supernatural, sci-fi, fantasy. What kind of genre do you think best fits your work?
I would say right now the best thing that fits my work is fantasy. I think that's what I've written most of. That's what People Ask Grandmaster is, and that's actually one of five books. And Dream Spinner Publications is going to take all five of them. And same with
Yeah.
Ashes of Life, which was the freebie I did for the Goodreads Don't Read in the Closet one.
Hmm.
And so I like that. I like sci-fi, fantasy, paranormal. And I've just really started with contemporary. It's really odd because I started with contemporary. The very first thing I posted online was a contemporary story,
Yeah.
and then I got completely away from it. Just went back to where I wanted to be, which was sci-fi. So
I noticed that a lot of the books you write have got a definite leaning towards the fantasy side. So I guess you kind of fall into a bit of a niche, don't you, when you start writing and you find something that you're the most comfortable with.
I think that's true. I think that you write what you really like and what you read most of, and to be honest with you, the very first story I wrote that was a contemporary, I did it to get out of my comfort zone, and
Yeah.
everybody really seemed to like it. So I was like, oh, maybe I should write more of this. Um, but yeah, I think we write with where we want, and I really do like fantasy. I like the whole world. I have a god complex, obviously. I want
I noticed that there's also quite a lot of dark imagery. I mean, I read The Purpose and I really enjoyed it, and there's quite a lot of darkness underneath the light. And I know that I think I made the comment about the fact that you didn't think it was a bad thing residing in a good thing. It was something a little different. Do you want to just extrapolate on that a bit for us?
sure. I kind of like at the end of the book, he kind of says something along the lines of the main character says, "You don't blame the lion for killing
Yeah,
bison. You don't blame lions for eating," and
yeah,
and and the whole premise of the book wasn't so much that the spirit was evil; it's just what it was,
yeah,
and but by our standards, maybe it was evil, because from our standards, you don't kill people, but to him, it was
mm,
just it was perfectly natural that this is how they lived. So I never really saw it as like a bad thing residing in a
yeah,
good person.
yeah. But
So,
I guess as well that in your job as a DA in Washington, you tend to see the worst of people.
yeah, we do. I mean, we actually, it's interesting because we deal with some of the worst people,
Mm,
but a lot of the people that we work closest with are the good people, like the cops or the victims, even, the people
mm,
that are just innocent victims. And I guess when I was writing Purpose, there was just a little bit of um, hopefulness, or, like this is what I would, if I ruled the world, this is how I would do it. But I mean, the whole idea was that the Purpose protects the innocent victim. So,
yeah, I think it's a fantasy that probably all of us really have in terms of trying to get the bad guys actually get their comeuppance. And if that's the only way that you can do it is by writing it into a book because that's the only way that's the way that you get it out, then I think that's probably a really good place to be.
I actually enjoyed the book. I actually enjoyed writing it. It was in DC, so I really kind of it was kind of fun to put him in the situations of like where I knew about and where I grew up and where I worked.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. It's kind of letting the fantasies reign. Maybe you're the master crusader out there wanting to do all these things, but maybe it just doesn't work that way.
I'm going to take the fifth on that one.
Okay. Your latest book, tell us a little bit more about it. Tell us about these two guys that come together after a while and what it's all about.
It's actually it's the first um, contemporary story I've had published, and it's a short story, which I guess is a really good place to start when you try
Hmm.
something new.
Yeah.
Um, I honestly, people ask me where it came from. I don't even remember how I came up with it, but it just sort of was there. And the two of them are Orrin and Thomas, and they were best friends to 13, and then Orrin came out, and Thomas really didn't like it,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and so anyway, the book opens with Orrin's parents having died in a natural disaster, and he goes home,
A
And
tornado, was it?
yes, it was a tornado. I actually lived in the Midwest for several years, Midwest of the United States, and I mean, I never forget the first time I saw a tornado, and I was like, I was just
Wow.
looking at it, thinking, "Wow, that's so cool!" And people were like grabbing me, like, "Get inside, get out of here!" Um, and so, yeah, so I started that. So it opens with that, and then it's how he deals with somebody that he's spent his life trying to get away from, pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so it's got roots in something that you've experienced in terms of the tornado and the story itself. Where did that kind of come from? Is it autobiographical? Is it just something that you see in your role every day, or?
To really, like I said, I don't really know where it came from. It's just sort of like I think I saw. Yeah, I was looking for it. I mean, it's not autobiographical. I've never lost anyone to a natural disaster. I've never, I didn't come out at 13. I didn't lose my best friend at Nick, that sort of stuff. So
Yeah.
it just was a
So,
story that kind of like, writers say it all the time, like I saw it. Well, I saw it.
yeah. Yeah. Because everybody always asks you what the inspiration is, and most people seem to think that most of the time you actually have to have experienced something to write about it, and it's just not true at all. I mean, that's why the writers have an imagination in the first place.
Right, and it's true. It's like, sometimes there are things that certainly spur you to a story, but sometimes
Yeah.
you just have it in your head. It's like, wow, what if? And there it goes.
Now, here's a real doozy of a question. In terms of reviews and things like that, and what people say about your books, how do you handle them? Bad reviews, good reviews, what do you think?
Yeah, reviews are kind of one of those very odd situations because you really want everybody to like your book.
Cool.
And I mean, I know you've had this situation, and intellectually, not everybody's gonna like the book. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you write the book, you publish the book, you're going to get negative reviews, and you know it. Um,
Yeah.
and then as soon as you get one, you're like intellect goes out the window, and you're just total emotions. Like what? It's like I feel like that. It's like what's wrong with these people? And so
Yeah, I know that feeling well.
and I will say that like I've heard people talk about it. It's like reviews really can be really disheartening. I mean, you read it, and it's
Yeah.
like somebody drops like a 1-star review on your book, and you're just like, why? What? I've
Absolutely.
never I've never written I've never written a bad review for someone. I mean, I'll take that back. I think I did write a really nasty review for Orson Scott Card's book because he's just such an asshole. Um, I mean, really. I mean, he's like, his whole premise of like, one of his very first books was Songbird or something, something, and it was about like a gay person, and like, the emperor was gay and the songbird was gay, and then he writes so he has no problem like
Yeah.
making money off of us until then suddenly he doesn't want to, and then suddenly he's just sort of just like he hates us.
Okay.
So I wrote a negative review about that because I just didn't like him. But I mean, I've never like read a book that someone wrote that really wasn't controversial and just said, I really hate this book, so I'm going to give it 1 star. Or I'm going to give it 2 stars, and I'm going to rip them a new, what, just because. And so
Yeah.
to me, it doesn't make sense that if you don't like a book and you're not a reviewer, why are you going to like trash it? So that's kind of like where I just try and tune them out and say, okay. But on the other hand, as you don't want everybody saying, "Oh, you're wonderful." You don't want to fall into what I call the naked emperor syndrome, where everybody tells you your emperor's new clothes are great and
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
naked.
Yeah.
So,
But how
I
do you
mean,
know how many of them are actually true then? And to be honest, you need a balance of good and bad reviews, because if you consistently get the good reviews, you'll get things levied at you that you're buying them, or that you're getting all your friends to put things on. So you do need some true, honest reviews. And I think
right.
you can learn from reviews as well.
So it's sort of like it's a very tough one, but I think the key for me is when when I get a bad review, it's just
Yeah.
step back, let it go, and do not respond.
Yeah, I sent you a link which was to there's a great UK author here called KJ Charles, and she did a wonderful flow chart on um, reviews and how to use them on her blog, and they kind of ask you a question and then you get an answer and you go to the next step, and eventually it ends up saying just sit the hell down and just write,
Right.
and
I
that's kind of, I think, where it goes.
I saw that when it came out, and I just was like, you should like. I think most of us should just like take it and then just like staple it on the wall and say, okay,
Yeah,
whenever you see a review, this is remind yourself that that's there.
just remind yourself not everybody's going to like what you write, which brings us to the next thing. social media, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, the new LO. I don't even know if anybody who's a member of this new LO site. I got an invite, so I'll check it out, see what it's like. What do you think about social media?
I mean, it's sort of a love-hate relationship because, really, I mean, social media allows you to connect with people like you. I've never in a million years have met you if it wasn't
Yeah,
for social media.
yeah,
Um, and then as much as you tell yourself not to, you always get sucked into this happened and you'll never guess what happened next. And you spend like
yeah,
hours a week reading just mindless fluff that does nothing. And then you
yeah,
always complain about how I have no time to do anything, and yet you spend an hour a day reading mindless stuff. So I mean, it's I don't know how you create the perfect social media where I can interact with you and then avoid
yeah,
all that stuff. I mean, I think that the perfect model is for people like me to have self-control, and I don't. So
yeah, yeah. I think sometimes you just need to get away from the seriousness of everything and just indulge a little bit. It's a fine line between how much you actually do indulging and how much you use it to promote yourself and actually use it as it's meant to be. So I think, as I said, a bit of a fine line there.
the thing
And
you touched on
yep,
something. It I think that somebody once said social media is not promotion media; it's social media. And I try and take that to heart. So what I try very hard not to do is post every day, buy the book, or a great 5-star review for my book. It just
yeah,
to me, either I like you or I don't. And quite frankly, you posting day after day that anonymous person I don't know gave me 5 stars, or somebody I never heard of gave me 5 stars. That doesn't really help me. But when I get to talk to people like you and I get to see people, it's like, okay, I'm going to buy your book just because you're a nice person, or I got along with you and it's interesting, and that's to me is the real use of social media from me, my point, which is probably why I don't sell very much, because I don't roll out and scream by my book every day.
yeah. I know what you're saying. It's not promo media; it's social media, and I think people forget the key word there is social. You need to find out what other people are enjoying. You need to, whether you enjoy it or not, makes no difference. You need to draw them into your pages. You need to let them know what's going on. You'll see my pages full of Benedict Cumberbatch and all sorts. Yeah, go on, go
You're
on.
the
You.
one no idea who he was until you told me, and then of course I've
Oh,
seen him
and,
before, but like, the name,
I have to know I've educated quite a lot of people to Mr. Cumberbatch, so I've been a really good advocate for him. So he owes
I
me something down the
I
line.
actually watched him do his ice bucket challenge. I remember that, and
Oh yeah,
it was very funny.
he's a funny guy. One day I'll get to meet him, just one day. What, in terms of our genre, it's not particularly mainstream when you look at the libraries won't stock it, and romance as itself is a bit of a catchphrase, and it doesn't have the allure and maybe not the literary fiction allure that some of the other genres have. What do you think, or have you any ideas as what we as authors can actually do to try and make that different, or get it mainstream, make it more acceptable?
There was, um, there was a big debate, and I mean, I'm 50, so I've been around through a lot of, I was there. I mean, I was just coming out of age when AIDS started, but there
Yeah,
was um, the whole like, dialogue about the gay ghettos having, do you want them? Are they useful? Do you need them?
yeah,
And in some ways, I wonder if that's not what romance started out as. It's sort of like, yes, when the quote-unquote gay ghettos began, they were necessary because you needed a place to live where you could feel safe,
yeah,
and you needed to be able to walk around and see other people like yourself and know that there were like places that you could live that were safe. And now, I don't know that now that like Maryland voted, I live in Maryland, the state of Maryland, and Maryland was the first state to officially vote to give marriage equality, not have the legislature do, but the citizens of the state voted 56 to 44 to give us benefits. I mean, do we need a quote unquote gay ghetto in Maryland? Probably not. So the whole idea of like romance, do we need it? Yeah, I think we did to start. And I think now we've kind of matured to the point where we don't need to just, work amongst ourselves. So I think now what has to happen is all of us, not me by myself or me and you, but the whole genre as a whole has to go out there and try and say, you know what? we're not just romance. We're romance, and the
Yeah,
subgenre is MM.
yeah,
And so we need to get ourselves into like romance times, and not as like the subclass as the MM arm of it. We need to go as part of romance, as part of romance times, because
yeah, yeah.
even among those there are things like westerns and historicals, and
There are, yeah,
so all of these romance have their own little subcategories. But when they go to romance times, they're romance times. And I think that's what
yeah,
we need to do. And I think that's really the key for us to move into the mainstream, because right now there's only so many dollars that go into the pot. So we've got to get ourselves into where the big pot is.
yeah,
That's how I see it.
yeah. I tend to agree with you on that. I mean, I was quite gratified by the fact that my last book has actually gone more into the mystery and detective categories. And in fact, there's nary a word of romance in the whole thing, even though that was how it was originally written. Because it's this gritty thriller thing, it's actually made more inroads into mysteries. And I think that by doing that, making more inroads into the genres as opposed to romance or even as MM, I think that way you're opening up for a lot more readers that maybe weren't attracted to your work in the first place, but maybe now will come into the genre and come into their own.
I think the two things come to that. Like, if you touched on a really good point, because what you're writing when you say you talk about your gritty thriller romance is that's the key to your book, and there's a small element of the romance in it, but the book's
Yeah.
not focused on it. So you need to get people to recognize that it is a thriller,
Yes.
and,
Yeah.
and just like any other thriller would have, okay, it's got a small element of romance, but I mean that's not. You're not trying to go after just the romance people. You're trying to go after.
Exactly. The fact that
And
there's two guys in it is incidental, really, when you think about it. It's just a story.
right.
Yeah.
Although then you get to the whole thing of like if you have like a lot of quote unquote hot steamy sex, you kind of turn off some people that just wouldn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You've got to make definitely warn them that there's quite a bit in there, as you know. Right, I think we've talked enough about books. Should we learn a little bit about the man behind the video screen?
Go ahead.
Are you ready for all these tempting testing questions?
Probably not, but
Probably not.
I did it to you, so I think it's fair.
All about.
Sorry, my son's just wandered in. Right, can I? Right, let's have a think. What are some things that make you really happy?
Well, I mean, just spending time with my daughter. I mean, I was telling somebody yesterday. It's kind of funny. I gave up my quiet, calm, normal homosexual existence to be a parent, and I was like thinking, like, what was I thinking? Why would I do that?
Yeah, yeah,
But I mean, just yeah, I mean, just being able to sit around, lay around, giggle, make her laugh, have fun with
yeah.
it. That makes me happy.
Normal sort of family life, nothing too taxing. Everybody just likes the simple things in life.
Right.
If you could go back in history, anybody you'd particularly want to be?
Mark Twain, and
Mark Twain.
not because he wrote Huckleberry Finn or Tom Sawyer.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just interesting. I mean, the man is quoted. Rumors of my demise have been greatly exaggerated.
Indeed.
I mean, he has. I mean, apart from his being a world famous author, or having his works be classics, he was just an interesting kind of guy, and I just would like to pick his brain for like an hour and see what I could come up with.
Yeah, I think everybody's got someone that they'd actually like to go back and meet. I haven't actually thought about it for myself. I'll have to give it some thought. In terms of, yeah, definitely, it'll have to be a big thought. Who in your life's influenced you the most? Have you got any role models that you think are
Probably,
really people that you can say have done that for you?
as cheesy as it's going to sound, my parents. I mean, my father was one of these classic, went to work, provided for his family, and we grew up in New York, and he'd get up and he'd leave at 7 and be home at 7:30, and so he didn't see a lot of us growing up but he made sure we had everything. He was I mean, he and my mother both kind of sacrificed to teach us to take care of us, and so they sort of taught me like what it is to be a parent, and I guess as I become a parent later in life, I've sort of realized even more how important those lessons were, and how important family is, and that sort of stuff. So I mean, I really look back, and 10 years ago I might have said somebody else, but I think now looking back, it's probably them.
Yeah, I think it's nice to be able to say that. I don't think there's a lot of people nowadays that can actually, especially in today's world of divorce and everything else, that can actually say that in a lot of instances their parents were their role models, which is rather sad. Bit of an indictment of the time, so it's really good to hear. In terms of you have a time machine, where are you going to go?
Oh, let's see, a time machine. You know, I kind of think it's kind of interesting because on the one hand, it's like everybody thinks about like, oh, you go back and like colonial times was wonderful, or the medieval times and stuff. But there's no air conditioning, there's no bathrooms, there's no shower, there's no refrigerator. I mean, I honestly don't think I would want to leave. Maybe the 50s just to see if it really was like a 50s
Yeah.
sitcom.
Yeah. Are you a glamper? Are you like your glamorous camping as opposed to actual just put the tent up and sleep on the ground camping?
No, I mean actually, I enjoyed when we went camping when I was a Boy Scout. I really enjoyed that part. That's just kind of
Mm.
different. But I'm talking about when you're done camping, you go home and take a shower. You're like 150 years ago, you go camping, and you go and maybe you find a river and throw yourself in. I mean, I don't know, but
Yeah. Bar of soap, carbolic soap, the old carbolic soap that you used to have
right.
in the days.
That's an interesting question because like I really, in some ways, I really like to see like castles and people
Yeah.
living in castles just to see maybe to convince me that they're not as nice as I always like to think they are.
Yeah, yeah. Have you ever been into a castle of any sort anywhere or in the world or traveled around and seen one?
I've actually been in a few. I've been to London. I've been to
Yeah.
England. I went to somebody took me out to Windsor when I was there. This was
Oh,
many years ago. I've been to castles in Spain, and I went to one when I was in Germany. But
oh, okay. Yeah. So you've done the route.
none of the really cool ones like that. They look like I didn't get to go to the ones in Germany that were classics that people take
Yeah.
pictures of.
One of the nicest castles we went to was literally was in Transylvania, which was Dracula's castle. You can't go to Transylvania and not see Dracula's castle. It's really amazing. So anytime you get the chance, definitely would recommend it. Next question. Tell us something about yourself that maybe not everybody knows.
Oh, jeez. Like, see, now I always say if I tell you that, then everybody sort of knows
No,
it.
I know. I'm a
Um,
hot taskmaster.
Geez, I couldn't. Uh, wow.
Do you
Uh,
snore?
no, actually I don't. It's kind of interesting. I don't do that, but
You know that now.
honestly, I'm kind of like a kind of an open book in a lot of ways. I tell people what about myself. I'm lactose intolerant. Does that count? I can't drink milk.
Oh, okay.
So interesting, right? People are just like dying to know that I don't drink milk.
Well, they may. You know, we asked the question. It's you've answered. So there you go. What's the worst thing that's ever happened to you? And then I think we'll probably start tailing off with one last question and let you go, and you can wipe your sweaty brow and say, "Whew, it's over."
um, Geez, I mean, I know it's gonna sound silly, but probably the worst thing that ever happened to me was just things choices I made that I'm kind of locked into that I'm not thrilled with.
Yeah,
Um, you make choices based on the information you have around you, and I was 20. The idea was you got a job, you got a career, you looked at making money, you had whatever, and when I was 20, I wasn't getting married. I knew I was gay. I wasn't getting married, and the idea of being able to have kids 30 years ago for a gay man was sort of like almost impossible to think about.
yeah,
And so but I still, because I hadn't come out, so I still followed the path that my parents had said, this is what responsible men do.
yeah,
So they can get married, have kids, and be able to support them. Whereas in looking back, if I had had to do over again, I would have made better choices for myself
hmm
and, done things differently. I think that's probably the worst thing that happened to me is I let myself do things that I probably shouldn't have in
yeah.
terms of my career and my life.
Okay, thank you for that. Last question. Are we maybe going to see you at UK Meet next year?
um, I would really like to be honest with you. I'd really like to. I haven't been. We've been talking about traveling. I mean, the last time I was in England was in 2001,
Wow,
and that was
long
the
time.
last. Yeah, it's the
Yeah,
last time I went overseas. And I mean, when we were growing up, I didn't really, we times were different. My parents were young when they got married, and I think my mother was 22 when she had me, 21.
yeah,
Um, And so I didn't travel on a plane until I was 12, and also back then flying on a plane was like really expensive. I mean,
Yeah.
so one of the things I would like to be able to do is to give little Q like a lot of stuff to be able to see things that I had to wait a little longer to see. And
Yeah.
I'm not exactly saying we were like the Rockefellers or showing my age or the Gates or something like that. But we can afford to do some of the things for her, and I think we should.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the beauty of this whole stuff is like you can plan your trips around stuff and you can do things. And okay, so the UK meets what, a couple 3 days, and then take the other 9 days of holiday to go and take her up to maybe to Scotland or to Brighton, someplace different than I went when I was younger.
Yeah. Give us some memories, I guess. That's what it's all about, isn't it? It's giving them the memories and things.
And she remembers things. It's really interesting because we go to the beach here in Delaware, and we found I just sort of like we fell in. People fall into like their favorite vacation spot sometimes. We were looking for a place to take her and the dog so we could go as a family. And we rented this house from the guy, and he gave us a really good deal because we were going off season. So we've been going back there with her, and she calls it Delaware House like she owns it. But she remembers. She remembers that we went twice now, and that this will be the third time we go this weekend. So it's like yeah.
Good. Giving kids those memories and things that they can remember later. That's good. Right. I think it's time for us to say goodbye and good night.
Well, thank you very much. This was good. I appreciate it, and we'll see what happens.
We will indeed. Cheers, Andy, and I hope best of luck with the book sales and the blog post will be up tomorrow.
Thank you so much.